It's a really wide-ranging set of changes, and it could be potentially the most drastic changes to French labour law we've seen since the introduction of the 35-hour working week back in 2000. There's lots of different areas affected. Let me give you some of the biggest ones and the ones that are causing the most controversy. Under French law currently, employers can only let workers go for economic reasons if essentially the company is going to go bankrupt otherwise. There's an attempt in this law to try and expand that, so if a company is losing money, significant amounts of money, for defined periods, it will allow them to let some workers go. Now, unions are concerned about that because they say that if a company is profitable outside of France but not in France, that could allow them to lay workers off in France while they still actually have the money to be able to pay them. There's another issue around compensation as well. In France, if you go to court and you're found to have been unfairly dismissed, you can get huge amounts of compensation. This law seeks to cap that. There's also some changes around the 35-hour working week. This law would seek to introduce more company-level negotiations on a 35-hour working week to allow employers more flexibility in how they distribute their staff. There are some good things in here for workers too. For example, big companies would be forced under it to talk about a disconnection right, that workers wouldn't be obliged to check emails while they're at home. So there are plenty of measures in it, but altogether this package would be a huge change to France's labour law.
Now, I'm sure for many of our viewers, those first proposals you were talking about don't actually sound that bad. Why is this such a big deal? Why are people so upset?
Well, you have to understand in France that workers are extremely protected under French law. Permanent workers are almost impossible to fire except under a specific set of defined circumstances. Now, French businesses say that hurts their ability to compete abroad, and it also stops them from hiring because they can't be flexible with when they need workers and when they don't. The OECD, the IMF and the European Commission all agree with that. They say that France's labour code is making it more difficult for companies to hire. Unions, of course, though, don't agree. They're really worried about the eroding of these protections that French workers have and that those unions fought for a very long period of time. Interestingly, public opinion on this seems to be going against this particular reform. We know a survey published over the weekend found 70% of people were against this law. There's an online petition you mentioned with 1 million signatures, but overall people are in favour of change. That same survey found that 52% of people do want change, just not quite in this form. You have to remember as well, these proposals have always been controversial in France. Back in 2005, an attempt to introduce a new kind of job contract with less protection was met with enormous demonstrations and strikes that went on for so long, the government had to try and scrap it. And that's what this government is trying to avoid, facing into a similar situation with these discussions with unions today.